Namaste, world raisers. Sabina and Roger here. Let's watch Sri M Buddha at the Gas Pump interview. A request by Pankaj Verma and Mahadev Gokale, and our world yogi, Dheeraj Sharma, went into their comments and said it's a must.
A must. So yeah, it's been on the list for a long time and we're finally getting to it. Yeah. I think mostly inspired because of this book. Sabina just finished it and I'm about halfway through, and yeah, it's an amazing book. So
Roger just met Babaji.
Just met Babaji in the book.
Ordinary spiritually awakened.
We love
our first gas pump interview.
Rick Archer and guest Sri M. Spiritually awakening people.
I'm really honored to have as my guest today, Sri M. I've just read his entire autobiography and found it fascinating. Many of you listening and watching will have read Yogananda's Autobiography of a Yogi, and Sri M's autobiography is somewhat reminiscent of that. He has had an amazing life and all sorts of amazing experiences trekking around the Himalayas with his master. We're going to talk about some of those during this interview. First of all, let me just welcome you. Thank you, Sri M.
Thank you very much.
And we had some technical problems before getting started here, so I appreciate your patience and while we iron those out. Let me read a brief biography of you. Sri M was born in Kerala, South India. At the age of 19 and a half, attracted by a strange and irresistible urge to go to the Himalayas, he left home. At the Vyasa cave, beyond the Himalayan shrine of Badranath, he met his master and lived with him for 3.5 years, wandering freely the length and breadth of the snow-clad Himalayan region. What he learned from his master, Maheshwarnath Babaji, transformed his consciousness totally. Back in the plains, he, as instructed by his master, lived a normal life, working for a living, fulfilling his social commitments, and at the same time preparing himself to teach all that he had learned and experienced. At a signal from his master, he entered the teaching phase of his life. Today, he travels all over the world to share his experiences and knowledge. Equally at home in the religious teachings of most major religions, Sri M, born as Mumtaz Ali Khan, often says, "Go to the core. Theories are of no use." Sri M is married and has 2 children, and he also just told me he has 2 Cocker Spaniels. He leads a simple life, teaching and heading the Satsang Foundation, a charitable concern promoting excellence in education. At present, he lives in Mandanapalli, Andhra Pradesh, forgive me if I pronounce that incorrectly, just 3 hours from Bangalore. And he also just completed a 7,500 and something mile walk from Kanyakumari, which is the southernmost tip of India, to Kashmir, which is way in the north. And we're going to talk about that too. So I'm really glad we're doing this. I'm wondering if it might be good to start with the story that you tell in your autobiography, where a young yogi in the Himalayas doing tapas is approached by an old Muslim man and rejects him, and you could take the story from there.
Sure. Now, I have started with the story without mentioning who these people actually are.
But you learn that as you go along in the book. You kind of figure it out. Yeah.
Yes, I have left it to be figured out because I didn't want to, from the beginning itself, say that I was this and I was that and so on. So actually the characters in the story, the young yogi to whom the Muslim, the Sufi man comes, is me in some past life.
Right.
Oh,
you remember now?
The great yogi who is the Guru is none other than Sri Guru Babaji, who for hundreds and thousands of years have been known to exist in the Himalayas. Yogananda Paramahamsa in his autobiography calls him Mahavatar, but that was a word, Mahavatar was a term coined by Yogananda Paramahamsa to show that avatars have come and gone and there's somebody who's still there.
But he's not really an avatar.
Well, we call him Sri Guru Babaji. To be very frank with you, we really don't know much about this person, except that we know that he exists and is not born in the normal way from like somebody's womb.
Yeah.
I would prefer to call him a being with human form. Let's put it that way. So I have in my past life been associated with him for some time.
And in this life, you met him several times.
Only twice.
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 Spoilers.
Not more than that. Twice. So, in fact, my coming and being born in a Muslim family and then being found out or discovered again by Maheshwarnath Babaji, who was Sri Guru Babaji's senior most disciple, as far as I know, is part of that story, because I had to learn how it feels to belong to one community and not get accepted by another, even though you're most sincere.
Yeah.
So I had to go through this, but because of one's own practical and spiritual personal experience, today I have no such problem of being accepted by the community, which is the majority community in India, for instance.
Nice.
But in the context of this story, you in your previous life were a young yogi and perhaps a little arrogant or something, and this Sufi man came to you and treating you to take him on as a student. You brushed him off, rejected him. He said, okay, then I'm going to jump in this river. And you said, well, do whatever you want. He jumped in the river and drowned. And then Babaji came to you and said, bad move.
Absolutely. He said, bad move. Who do you think you are? You know?
Yeah.
And because from the point of view of somebody who has had high spiritual experience, there's no difference between people, external differences. I mean, one has to see how mature a person is spiritually. And if he needs guidance, it's our duty to guide, not ask questions. So that was a big lesson to me. Plus, that you can also go quite high in your meditation and so on and still be left with an ego, you know, an arrogant ego, which is it's so difficult to cut out. I see sometimes, especially when people, you know, when you're somewhat different from others and you have some qualities which may be more than human in some way, people start worshipping you and, you know, looking up to you. Now, the one thing you have to be very careful is how one's own ego begins to expand when this happens, you know. So this was a great lesson to me. So in this life, I have been extremely careful about this, in watching myself carefully. And if somebody praises me too much, I try to just cut it off and say no. You know, you must have read the Gita and so on, I'm sure, because I kind of know roughly your background. And I think that one of the things in the Gita that really has affected me, is Tulya Ninda Stutirmauni, which means the yogi considers praise and blame as the same. Neither does he get flattered, nor he goes down when somebody says, oh, he's a stupid idiot. So this is something very, very important.
I really think it is, and it really, I've given it a lot of thought to it and talked about it with a lot of people, because there's so many teachers, some of whom are really impressive. You know, they've really attained a very high state. You sit in their presence and you feel very profound darshan. They do wonderful things and beneficial things, and yet you find, you know, they have these scandals and problems and issues that happen over and over again. And there are a few exceptions, but it seems to be generally the rule more than the exception, and it really confuses and disillusions people when this happens.
Yeah. So I would... Do you want me to respond?
Yes, please.
I would like to say this. Before you choose a person as your teacher, give it a lot of time. I think one shouldn't accept somebody based on external appearances. Somebody might look very nice and holy, but that doesn't mean anything. And the other is, it is these disciples who raise you up and take you right up And then suddenly when something happens to them which they don't like, they drop you down like hot coals, like a hot brick. So the less dependent you are on these, your so-called followers, at least internally, the better off you are. You know, one has to be careful on this point. Very often, some of the scandals are created by people who have had a personal problem, possible. Sometimes they may be genuine, can't say that. And sometimes they may also be to test you. This is also possible. So there are so many angles to this. You know, so my understanding is when you go to a spiritual teacher, you just need to ask how we are progressing, rather than look at other things. When I first went to the Ramakrishna mission, Babaji had told me, spend some time with the Ramakrishna mission. You know the Ramakrishna mission is a very big one. So when I went to Bellumat, to the headquarters, there was this Swami Ranganathananda, who's a well-known person. He has lectured, he has written on the Upanishads. He was at one time the president of the Ramakrishna mission also. He was not at that time. He was heading the Ramakrishna Institute of Culture. So when I went as a young man, he called me aside and he said, look, you have come to an ashram. Don't think that you have come to the holiest place on earth. Because this place is also built up of human beings. And when there are many human beings, there are these small caucuses and circles and so on. So don't get caught up with this. Don't think everybody is a saint. Many of them are here for sadhana. They are not saints. So you stay free of these little groups and try to understand the teachings. And if you want to understand the teachings, there are books, there are senior monks, talk to them, figure it out, but don't get caught up in this. Now this can happen in any ashram, because an ashram is a small place where so many kinds of people come together. And different people come for different reasons. Some come to become successors to the Guru. So, you know, so there is some politics involved. I mean, it's normal because we are human beings. Therefore, in this situation, it's difficult to avoid it. So be careful. That's all you can do.
Some gurus, I think Mata Amritanandamai uses this expression. She says sometimes an ashram is like rocks in a tumbler. You know, you put all these rough rocks in a tumbler and it tumbles and tumbles and tumbles, and the rocks are, you know, getting all their rough edges smoothed out, but they all come out nice and smooth in the end.
Yeah, maybe not all, but at least some.
Some, yeah.
Let me say.
Yeah, totally. That reminds me of the communities I used to live in.
You want to talk about it? Because
What?
that's why I paused, just because Sabina has way more experience than me in spiritual communities. Because when I was in the communities, like even the November course, which is I think pretty much the only one of like a big group of people doing something together spiritually, for that whole month I was silence. I wore the yellow ribbon and I never got too involved. So I was kind of like what they're talking about, the one who stays still within the group, and I participated in our group activities where we had to share and all that because that was part of it. But other than that, no, I was like flying solo. But Sabina has told me she's volunteered at Buddhist centers and she's experienced, you know, what they're talking about. Just it's not necessarily as holy and spiritual and advanced as you think it's going to be, right?
No, not at all. Because the first center I volunteered at, which I absolutely loved, and I was very new too. You know, I didn't have any money. I needed a place to volunteer or work, and I ended up. That's how I ended up there, right? Like for example, and we were 15 volunteers at that time. And the volunteers were there for different reasons. People go to these centers and work and volunteer there for different reasons. Some want to learn English. Some just get out of a drug addiction and seek refuge. Some run away from home or from their husband. And the husband shows up and, oh my God, like there's a lot of drama. And, you know, then lost travelers come across. And yeah, and so, and even the the community there, you know, the monks and nuns. There was one who lost the boyfriend died, and she became a nun, and it's like the motivations for being in these centers is not always, you know, spiritual in a way, and it's not, you know, to seek the ultimate often. It's just causes and conditions come together and they end up there. And I personally loved it. It was so diverse and crazy, but I learned so much, but because it was still a safe space. It was still a space, a really beautiful, and for me personally very holy space. And the other centers I visited and volunteered at were the exact same thing. And I was a very good volunteer, and so I was, when somebody came and was interested in volunteering, the manager came to me and said, can you please talk to that person first so they have a bit more of an understanding of what it means to be volunteering there. And one of the first things I said is that it's not a holy place. People have their delusions, and it's pretty much exactly like outside, just that, you know, that there is the holy space is there, but the people are, you know, on their own journey and experiencing all kinds of difficulties. Yeah. But for me personally, I always loved it. Yeah. And I love these crazy people. Because I was crazy too, like, you know.
Yeah, so these ashrams and monasteries and whatever word we use, churches, for example. So there's the culture of religion and then being in a religion. So that's kind of what it reminds me of. It's like there's a difference between being religious and spiritual, or you can be spiritual but not seeking. So I guess the real difference is, are you seeking? Are you seeking to grow and evolve and expand and actually, you know, transform, or just, you know, be religious or spiritual without, you know, growing, thinking that, okay, well, I'm just being where I'm at. But still very much ego driven.
So it seems like there are a couple of cautionary notes here. One would be for teachers themselves to somehow be cautious of and somehow rise above the possibility of having their ego inflated by the attention that comes to them. And maybe we can talk about that one a little. Let's talk about that one a little bit more before we go on to the second point I was about to make. I mean, how I guess it brings up the question of when does one actually become qualified to become a teacher? I've heard that in Zen circles it's said that after your awakening you should wait at least 10 years. And so who determines, and I know you waited a long time and went through all kinds of ordinary life circumstances before you took on any kind of teaching role. How does one know one's ready, and how does one avoid prematurely jumping into that role?
Yeah. I can give you a few guidelines. This is from my experience. When you teach, when one starts talking to people, I did it very hesitantly in the beginning. You have to see if the words that you use, are they really coming from your personal experience? Or are you imagining them to be your personal experience? Maybe you have read about them somewhere. So this is one thing that can help us to watch out. The other is, some of the teachings are not meant for everybody. So when you say the same thing to 100 people, there's a possibility that some people take it in one way and some people take. So we should have the capacity to judge what is to be said here and what is not to be said here. Or what is to be said there and what is not to be said here. See, this is an extreme way of doing it, expressing it. When Jesus Christ or whoever, the great yogi who walked in Jerusalem, said, give that which is good and give not that which is good unto dogs. Cast your pearls before swine, lest they cast them down and trample them and turn again and rend you. I wouldn't say that. I won't call anybody a dog or a swine, but it's an extreme way of saying it. Yeah. So we have to watch this very carefully. Is this person ready to take? Now the problem is when you go into a large gathering and speak, you can't really choose whom you're talking to. So the only thing is you have to say, okay, I'll talk, let's see who can take it up and who doesn't. The other criteria is don't give too much importance to certain powers that may develop in the yogi. So try and, as much as possible, to keep away from all this business of healing and things like that. If you want to have a spiritual teaching, it's better to stick to it as the central part of your life. That's the other thing. So these are some of the criteria which I took. The most important, of course, is that unless you have experience, it's better not to teach. Because if something goes wrong, you won't be able to put it back in order. This especially so when you come to yogic teachings. The teachings of Kundalini Yoga or the teachings of Kriya Yoga. You can't just teach somebody if you don't know and if you haven't experienced it yourself. Because tomorrow if something goes wrong, you won't be able to set it right. And we are dealing with powerful energies.
What about teachers that are maybe partway there? Can they help people up to a point? For instance, one might be qualified to teach grammar school, or one might be qualified to teach high school or college or on the graduate level. And you could be very useful as a grammar school teacher, even if you would not be qualified to teach at the college level. So in the spiritual sense, do you also see that with spiritual teachers?
I think so. This is possible, provided they are transparent and sincere and clear and say, look, this I have not experienced. This is very important.
So honesty.
Yeah, be very honest
humility.
about it. Say this is what it is said. I have, in fact, even in the Upanishads, when the great rishis taught certain things, they said, I don't understand how to put this to you. Now what about us, ordinary people? So we have to say that, look, this is how it is in the scriptures, this is the science, this is how much I have practiced. You can also practice it, but beyond that, I don't know.
I remember a line from the Upanishads, I bet you can pinpoint it, where there's some saying about ultimate reality, and then the saying is, perhaps he knows, and if he doesn't know, then maybe nobody knows.
Exactly. It doesn't say nobody knows. Perhaps he knows, or perhaps he knows not.
Right.
So, this is from the Rig Veda.
Yeah.
It's about the creation hymn. It says, in the beginning, what existed? Does this exist? Or did only the gods exist? Or was there nothing around? And then it says, who knows? Perhaps he knows who is the chief of the gods, or perhaps he knows not. See, this attitude should be something to be kept fresh in our minds. It shouldn't be said, oh, this is Rig Veda 2,000 years ago, let's not forget it. No, this is so important.
Yeah. So even the rishis who cognize the Rig Veda are admitting that they have their limitations.
Absolutely. Everybody. I think as long as you have a human body, there are some restrictions, there are some limitations, especially because you are talking about something which is beyond description. The Kena Upanishad, one of the most important of principal Upanishads, says, this the word cannot express. Yad vacha nabhyutitam yanavagavi, that which words cannot express. That alone is the Supreme Being, nothing that you worship here. Now this is a very sweeping statement. So one has to be very careful with this. I'm saying the key is to say, look, this much I know, beyond that I don't know, but these are the teachings. Practice it and find out for yourself.
Yeah, on a related note, here's something you said in your book. You said, no human being with a physical brain can ever be omniscient.
I believe fully.
Yeah. And actually one thing related to what you just said is that, teachers saying this much I know and that much I don't know. I sort of find it healthy in the case of most teachers if they have some kind of connection with a lineage or tradition. They give homage to a teacher and are not taking upon themselves the whole, authorship of the knowledge.
That helps. That helps. Like I belong to the Nath Sampradaya because Maheshwarnath Babaji was a Nath. And before him, his guru was Babaji, who has no Sampradaya. I mean, we can't say he belongs to this tradition or that. But I still feel I belong to that tradition of them. So when I teach, I usually say, this is what the teaching says. And it's a deliberate attempt not to protect myself more than the teaching.
Right.
It's deliberate. I might have had the experience. And when I said in my book, which you said just now, that nobody is omniscient, omnipresent, omnipotent, this connects to your previous question in some way. Many disciples or many followers begin to consider a great teacher or someone who's become famous as omnipresent, omnipotent, and omniscient.
Right.
And then when they discover in life due to certain experiences that it is not so, then they get completely disillusioned.
I've seen that.
You see? So, yeah.
Yeah, in fact, there was a woman that I was arguing with at one point that felt like her teacher was omniscient, and I said, "Oh, really? Do you think your teacher knows what we're emailing about right now?" She said, "Oh, yeah, she's totally tuned in." And then the woman ended up getting breast cancer, and she got very disillusioned because she felt like her teacher should have known it and should have said something and so on. And I hated to say I told you so, but there was that sort of feeling.
If you have a minute,
sure.
Can I?
Yeah.
This is an old happening which happened in Thiruvananthapuram at the Ramana Ashram. Ramana Maharshi. So, Ramana, there was a young man who came to the ashram and spent 3 days without food. And he was also in Maun, like Maharshi, he didn't speak. And then after 3 days, he sends a note to the Maharshi. He's also in Maun, like the Maharshi hardly spoke, Ramana Maharshi. He sends him a note saying, "Look, I have been here for 3 days. Nobody asked me, are you hungry? Nobody gave me food. And you, I've seen you every day. You didn't ask me either. And you're feeding monkeys. But what about me?" And there's a beautiful answer given by Maharshi. He broke his silence to speak to this man. He said, "If you didn't ask, how would I know?"
That's great.
And there are people who think that Ramana Maharshi was omniscient.
Yeah.
I think he didn't think so himself.
And yet, on the other hand, there were some instances where he knew something that it obviously took some deep ability to know. For instance, there was this man who was a painter, and he was painting the cave up above, and Vilpakshu cave or whatever it was called, and Ramana was down in his ashram, and he was standing in the back of the hall during some ceremony that was being held to commemorate some renovation that had taken place in the ashram, and he was feeling so bad that Ramana couldn't appreciate the work he had done in this other place. And so there was this whole story where Ramana wasn't supposed to go any place because his health was bad, and some attendants found him basically crawling up the mountain on his hands and knees, getting all cut and so on, to get up to that cave to see this guy's work and appreciate it. He had just picked up on his thought and felt compelled to go and give him that blessing.
There are 2 points in this. One is the compassion of this person. So important. Yeah. The second is, that doesn't mean always one knows.
Right. It's
one may
specific.
Not. Yeah. One may or one may not. It's natural. It's not as if it's built. The other is, somewhere along the line, I think that Babaji used to say this to me, people have misunderstood the Vedantic dictum, which says, that which when once known, nothing more remains to be known. What it means is not that you are omniscient.
Right.
Of course, you may be better than somebody else, of course, because a yogi has certain faculties. But it means that you have got complete satisfaction. You have no more desires to be fulfilled. Therefore, you don't need to know anything.
Yeah.
It means you don't need to know anything, not that you know everything.
Right. Yeah, the way Maharishi Mahesh Yogi used to put it, he said, you gain the benefit that would be had were you to know everything, but you don't know everything.
Yes.
You gain this, what he used to call the home of all knowledge.
Absolutely. I think that's a nice description.
Yeah. There's another point that's related to what we've been talking about with gurus and all, and that is that some people feel like they should hang in there with a particular guru through thick and thin, no matter what happens. Even if the guru seems to be going off the track, they just hang in there because he must be perfect, he must be wiser than me, he must know what he's doing. It seems crazy, but I'll hang in there. And other people sort of, they cut and run, or maybe they move from one teacher to another throughout their life. Now, and so gurus for them are somewhat transitionary figures. In your case, you had one primary guru, but you also took instruction and guidance and so on from a variety of other teachers. So what would you say about that point?
I think that should be left to the aspirant. Different people are made differently. I stuck with one teacher, but this teacher himself instructed me to go and see other people.
Yeah.
So there are such teachers. Now in Sufis, for instance, among the Sufis, there is no compulsion to stick to one teacher. In fact, after a while, the Sufi teacher tells his disciple, now this is all that I can give you, go to this other guy. You see, so there is no such thing. But there are some people who like to stick on and hang on. And if they are not disillusioned, probably they are doing the right thing.
Yeah.
What you have to watch is, do they get disillusioned at the end?
Yeah.
And even, there's another good thing here. Even if the guru turns out to be a fake, all the faith that you have put in him and the practice you have done sincerely may help you, even if it doesn't help him.
Yes.
That's a good point.
That is a very good point.
Yeah.
Let's end part 1 here. Wow.
Boom.
Loving this. Right? And then, because that is teaching. That's even a teaching within the Bhagavad Gita, that all intention and devotion and true dedication, to the path, no matter what your guru, Krishna says all devotion, comes to me, no matter what path, right? So even your guru and whoever you're surrendering on, like, if you can understand, non-duality in one source, that, true effort and intention and devotion is always going to the Supreme. If you're holding that in mind, and if you see your guru as the Supreme, then you're going to get benefit, even if that being is fake. So, so that's something I kind of understood, early on, which is why I'm so pro, it doesn't matter. We don't know who is fake and who is not fake. And if we label somebody as fake, then all of a sudden we're thinking that all of their students mustn't be on the path in the right way and advancing, and must all just be disillusioned and like a cult, and it's crazy. But then that cuts you off from not only the guru, but also the students, right? And as spiritual seekers, we need to unite and understand and trust that, okay, well, these seekers are, seeking, and then, oh no, a big controversy, and the guru ended up being truly like fake and materialistic or whatever it was. But we don't want to abandon the seekers, because they might have gotten, great benefit just for holding that faith. So.
Or they might have had some insights that you don't have yet, so you can share them. We're on one team here. We're all, seeking the ultimate, if we're really seeking, like the ones who are seeking it, right?
Yeah.
And we have to support each other. And if you think that someone is like not really on the way or delusional, then, you can keep observing that. But if that person doesn't reach out to you and, wants to know your view, I don't know, maybe you should just observe until you have the wisdom and, awareness really flowing through you, and the Holy Spirit's really flowing through you. And then you have this, like, you have to address something, right? But until that point, you just stay humble with what you know and realized.
Yeah. I also do love what he touched on about, the teachers and not becoming a teacher too soon on the journey. Because, there is a lot of teachers out there. And then these are the ones that I don't want to disparage about and just call them fake, because there still is a role. And I think in a sense they are, remaining humble. There's not many that are going right out and saying that, oh, I'm fully awakened, because awakened to me means, something different than fully enlightened, right? Like the Buddha awakened is fully enlightened, but now we're using awakening, as a term of just, on the path. So we're awake to being on the path, right? Where most people are not awake to being on the path. So that would be, awakened. And then on the path, there's going to be certain realizations, and eventually you want to share that. But we got to be, clear with where we are, because it's true that when you get into these high practices, the yogic, Kriya Yoga, And what he was also talking about was that, yeah, you got to be careful. All of a sudden your student is advancing like significantly to the point where they're going to pass you, and you're teaching how to do things and you haven't experienced that. Yeah, that's troubling. So, so for me, being on the journey for quite some time now and having a lot of intellectual knowledge, and then starting this YouTube channel, it's like, yeah, I want to share what I know, but yeah, there's the very, very higher states. Yeah. I have had some experiences, but not that. So I'm like, how do we be spiritual and live up to that? And that's why I think it's great where spiritual people can get on YouTube just to share the teachers and the teachings. Like this man right here, Buddha at the gas pump, how he's sharing all these interviews of spiritual teachers. Yeah. So it's great. And then the other thing was that he talked about that I thought was interesting was just talking about not all of these enlightened beings are like fully omniscient, right? And I see that too with, like, if you know David Hawkins' work at all, there's the map of consciousness, and level of 1,000, I would see that as being omniscient, like Krishna, Buddha, and Jesus, right? So Jesus was like one, and he knew what was going to happen before it happened. But there's different levels to enlightenment. But at the same time, there's also, we're watching little Krishna episodes, and you got to wonder, because if it's, historically true, like written in the sacred texts, because I always wonder during those episodes, is like, okay, a demon comes and just takes these kids and puts them in a cave, right? And then comes back a little while later, and meanwhile, Krishna's having a trial, just playing a game like, oh, my friend stole the kids, right? And then this demon comes and gets 3 more kids and puts them in the cave, and then a little while later, Krishna's like, oh, they really are missing. Oh, I got to go save them now, right? But if he was omniscient, he would have known the second that the demon appeared in the vicinity, and right?
Yeah.
But it's like maybe he's making himself not omniscient to be part of the play.
I observed that too, and for me, I explained it to myself that he's still playing a role in this world, and he can't just save everyone from everything, save everyone from bad experience. He could, but it shouldn't be that way, so that the people actually, experience hardship and trauma, and so can evolve in this lifetime. That was my explanation. He knew exactly that there is a demon coming, but he didn't do anything before, so that people experience things, and that he, it's like, and also, because, I thought about that a little bit. Also, it's like, there is like this patience there. There is like the knowing they're not going to be killed right away. There is the knowing that everything is a divine play. There is the knowing that this is not ultimately the worst thing that can happen. It's not like a real tragedy. It's just there's this patience, and I'm still going to look after my cows, and then I'm going to go help them. It's like this all is well.
Yeah. And when you also know that when you get into the higher teachings, that nobody really dies, right? Yeah. And everything is the ultimate manifesting as all things, right? So in that context, everything is Krishna, and everything, and that is the play. The play is that we don't know that, we are Krishna, right? So higher level of consciousness, we're encapsulated in this ego and in the veil, right? So anyways, time to break through. Thank you so much for joining us for part number 1, and we will see you on part number 2.